right, let's finish up World War I. All right. So here we are towards the end of the war. Let's talk about the Russian Revolution. Okay. Now, when we were approaching the start of America's intervention in the war, that was when the Russians started having to kind of pull back, and this is why. Okay. They had taken huge casualties, and the country was struggling. Huge casualties here. We're talking about losses, okay? Losses. And so we are not necessarily only talking about people here, too. We're talking about, they've lost resources. They've lost, all kinds of things. They've lost farmland, I'm sure, to battles. They've lost, oh, excuse me. They've lost all manner of things, okay? So they had taken huge casualties, huge losses. The country was struggling. March 1917, the actual revolution began, and the Tsar, their ruler, Tsar Nicholas II, was forced to step down, okay? And once they revolted, once they overthrew their leader, they replaced him with a democratic government, but it says they failed to help, I'm going to underline failed here, with food shortages and low morale. Okay? So this is when, November 1917, once we've made Tsar Nicholas II step down, and I say we, I mean, as the Russian people, once he's been made to step down, and once the Democratic Republic the Democratic government that they've put in place is shown to be inadequate, then we start seeing in November Lenin's group of the Bolsheviks, okay? Here. So he decided, Lenin, and he led his group, he decided that the way to fix Russia, oh, excuse me again. He decided that the way to fix Russia, to get her back on her feet, was to install a regime of communism. Okay? So, Bolshevik here is defined as a member of the movement that led the Russian Revolution in November 1917 and later became the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Communism here, I'm going to circle this one. A political or / social system whereby the state owns and controls everything. Okay, so Lenin and his Bolsheviks, they come in, seize power. Clearly, they made Nicholas II step down. They weren't happy with what he was doing. The Democratic replacement was also not cutting the mustard, so it was pretty easy for him to come in and set up power. Just about anything sounded better than what they were going through. He promised here, we've got three things here that he promised: land, peace, and bread. Now you can imagine how exciting that sounds to a war-torn country where things are being taken away and government is dissolving around them. They're not being taken care of. It sounds really, really awesome to have someone show up and promise you these three things, which is another reason why he was able to show up and kind of take power for himself. All right, now communism. State owns and controls everything, okay? So that means that here, if we have government up here at the top, okay? That means that it regulates your food and water, like groceries, right? And then also, oh, catch up video, catch up, you can do it. Your food and water like groceries. Also, your living conditions are issued to you. Also, your job is likely issued to you as well. Okay? Government hands out all of this stuff. And they would also probably, oops, they would also probably provide doctors. But anyways, everything that you get comes from the government. Communism, meaning coming from the same word that it's like communal, community. So everything goes to the government, and the government deals it back out. Okay? Okay, so let's go back here to Russia. Russia was stretched way too thin. Okay, so March 1918, after all of this, I'm going to underline March 1918, after all of this political unrest, where they've changed governments 3 different times in the span of 1 year, they step out of the war. They're like, look, we've got too much going on. We cannot fight your war and deal with everything that we've got going on at home. We have to back out, Germany. So Germany said, okay, but if you back out, you need to leave us a whole bunch of your land. Because again, Germany here, it says Germany was certain the war would end soon. Now, unfortunately for Germany, they didn't realize that the war ending would mean that they lost, but that was their thinking. They were like, okay, well, if you're leaving us high and dry, then, to make that up to us, you might as well leave us this large portion of your land. And that here is, not sure what color that shows up for you. It's a pinkish color in between the green and yellow here. I'm going to underline seeded in 1918 here. It's this pinkish sort of blob, and that was what they left. They said, okay, we're having to back out of the war, but we'll leave you this piece of land. We agree to that. All right. So now we have, oh, if my picture will load. Oh, technical difficulties. Come on, picture, you can do it. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep talking, so you guys just listen, and hopefully it'll show up. In worst case, if it doesn't, then we'll still have a good discussion. Okay, so here, the next thing that they're dealing with, March 1918, is called the Second Battle of the Marne. Now, if you'll remember, we've already had one right at the beginning of the war. And so here it says, Second Battle of the Marne, March 21st, 1918. Okay, 3/21, 1918. Germans marched nearly all the way to Paris, hoping to end the war before the rest of the American forces arrived. Okay? Because they did not want to tangle with an entire brand new army. They wanted to continue to beat the people that they had been beating, win against the people that they had been winning against up until this point. Okay? So, 3/21/1918, Second Battle of the Marne. Oh no, that's not going to fit. Marne. Okay, this is important because Germany was trying to go ahead and win the battles, win the war, before the Americans got to them. Okay, so that's March. In May and June, then American forces were there and were able to stop them. And then in July, the Second Battle of the Marne. So this is July 1918 when this finally happens, not when it's being set up. Let me make sure this is being clear. And oh look, my picture did show up. Yay. Okay, so March 1918, they start settling up. Spring offensive right here. Now that I can underline it. Spring offensive. The Germans are going to Paris. They do not want to fight the Americans. They want to win before the Americans get there. Okay? May and June here. Put a star by this. May and June, American forces stopped them, which is precisely the reason that they didn't want to go up against the Americans, because they knew that we had a shot. And so this spring offensive in July actually ended with the Second Battle of the Marne. They had been setting it up since March, trying to get it over and done with before the Americans could come and really back up the French or Belgians or, anything like that. So when they lost the Second Battle of the Marne, the Germans lost the territory they had gained that spring, and the Allies went on the offensive. Now, what does that mean, on the offensive? So let's put here, on the offensive, down here, equals started acting aggressively, okay? Because now we're not talking about defending anything. We're not defending territory. We're not defending people as much as now we're moving offensively, which means that we're striking out into German territory and trying to reclaim it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so offensively as opposed to defensively. This is a much more aggressive position that happens from us, from the Americans, after the Second Battle of the Marne. The next one here that's listed is the Battle of the Argonne Forest. The Allies continue to push the Germans back towards Germany. The AEF defeated them at the Battle of St. Mihiel. I have no idea how to say that. And then joined Allied troops for the Battle of the Argonne Forest, also known as the Meuse-Argonne Offensive. And both sides took massive losses here on September 26th, 1918. Okay, this was a rough one. All right. So, again, if you'll remember, I'm going to try and circle this real small so I don't scribble over everything else. AEF there is the American Expeditionary Force. Okay, this was not officially the American Army or Navy or Air Force or anybody. This was not an official branch of the American military as much as it was sort of a provisional branch. Like, this was the first time we had really gotten involved overseas. So, brand new. They were just called the American Expeditionary Forces. Armistice. Armistice. Okay. Germany had underestimated the American forces, okay? They knew that they didn't want to fight us, but they didn't understand fully until we actually entered the war just how badly it could potentially go for them. Its navy was close to mutiny. I'm not sure if you guys all know what mutiny is, but to mutiny is to revolt, to turn against your leadership, okay? And normally this would be indicative of the people in the Navy saying, no, you're just sending us into these battles that we can't win. You're setting us up to be killed, and we're not going to have it. We're not going to do it, okay? So that's the kind of mentality, that's the sort of mindset that they were in at this point. The Central Powers were falling apart. Remember, the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire. Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire withdrew from the war in early fall 1918, Austro-Hungarian Empire soon after, leaving Germany totally by themselves. Parts of these empires, such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary, declared themselves independent nations, so they also bailed on the war. Germany experiencing a severe food shortage, okay? So they're starting to not even be able to sustain their own war effort, okay? So not only are they losing the people that they were counting on to fight with them and for them, but they are also running dangerously low on resources, on supplies, okay? And so here, November 9th, 1918, Wilhelm II, the German emperor, stepped down. Kaiser here is a word for leader. And when he realized that things were just not going to go his way, he stepped down. And the new government that was put in place agreed to President Wilson's terms of armistice. Do you remember the 14 points? The idea of how things could be resolved. So they agreed to stop fighting, and then we have the these points kind of being debated back and forth. Okay, the ceasefire here. Let me outline that. Ceasefire became official at 11 a.m. on November 11th, 1918, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Okay. The cost of war. This was a rough one, just in general, because it went on for so many years. It impacted so many of the European countries. So much land was swapped back and forth. People were uprooted. So let's talk about the cost of the war. Okay, an entire generation of European men devastated is what this says here. Ravaged Europe, devastated an entire generation of European men. Historians' best guess is 37 million, underline that, were killed or wounded in 4 years of fighting. And there's no working farms or factories at this point because at this stage, things have been destroyed, people have been uprooted, and it's just not conducive to things like farms or factories. Okay, so the economy was also suffering, not just personal suffering, but the economy itself. A lot of people died. Fewer people able to make and spend money, and fewer amounts of money going around. There's less money going around, and that means there's less money to be had. Okay. Also, here, I'm going to put this in brackets. All right, and a flu pandemic in 1918 killed more people than had died during the war. The world was ready for peace. Okay, let me put a star up here by pandemic. I'm sure, what is that? That was a very strange little symbol that I did there. I'm sure you guys have heard this word enough for the greater part of your life, but I'm sure you guys are done with this word, is what I mean to say. An epidemic or widespread disease that affects an entire country or continent or even the entire world. Now, this in 1918, this one was referred to as the Spanish. Whoa. What is happening? Spanish flu. But really, this was a strain, now that we know about such things. This was actually a strain of the H1N1 virus, whereas currently, right now, we're dealing with a coronavirus. But yeah, so this, if you look up the Spanish flu pandemic that was happening around this time, you'll see that they had to do quite a few things that we're actually having to do today. They were quarantined in homes. They were asked to follow social distancing measures. Public events were canceled. And as a matter of fact, towards the end of the war, when they were wanting to welcome troops home, there were a few places, a few cities that actually thought, hey, we could get together and have a parade. This is really special. And unfortunately, it caused a resurgence of disease because they broke social distancing and they broke the shelter-in-place order. So hopefully this time America will be a little smarter than that. Okay, so let's talk about the Treaty of Versailles, the actual end of the war. Okay. In 1919, the Big Four, okay, so we've got President Wilson, 1. Prime Minister David Lloyd George of England, okay? George, 2. Premier Georges Clemenceau of France, Clemenceau, and Prime Minister Vittorio Orlando of Italy. Okay, Orlando. 1, 2, 3, 4. They met at Versailles near Paris. Okay, so it's called the Treaty of Versailles because that's where it was debated and I believe also signed. No Central Powers were invited. Okay. These are all, if you'll notice, these are all members of the Allied powers because they were not going to give the Central Powers equal say in this. They were just going to say, no, you need to make things right. Okay? Wilson wanted to end the war with minimal animosity. Animosity here means like tension or stress between people. Okay? Hurt feelings or angry feelings. Animosity. Okay? And so what the European nations themselves had pretty much decided was that they just wanted Germany to, oh no, I lost my picture. Oh, there it is. Okay. So they wanted the Germans to take full blame. Okay. They wanted Germany to make this right to them. They were like, okay, it is all 100% Germany's fault. They started spreading this idea through these other countries and recruited other countries to have this fight, and we want Germany to make things right to everyone around. Okay, so they wanted Germany to take full blame, lose its colonies, lose its military, and pay reparations. So reparations here, financial compensation paid to someone who has been wronged. Okay, so this is saying, that Germany would agree to pay for things destroyed in the course of this war, to help the countries that had been wronged or damaged in some way, to get back on their feet. Again, remember, the economy is not doing great at this point because so much has been destroyed and so many lives have been lost at this point. So economy is not great. So some extra money, it would really help these surrounding countries. All right. So on June 28th, 1919, exactly 5 years after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, the Allies and Germany signed the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so I'm going to underline that date for you as well. So 5 years from the assassination that sparked the war to the day that the treaty was signed ending the war. And it harshly punished Germany. It split up. Remember, again, these 14 points that he had sort of proposed, that President Wilson had proposed. They were basically like, okay, let's give everybody else their land back it's been taken from Germany. Let's let them set up their own governments. Let's encourage their freedom and independence and stuff like that. Remember the 14 points, okay? Okay, so it split up, it divvied up land, split up the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, created the League of Nations, redrew boundaries within Europe and the Middle East. Okay, and so the idea was everybody kind of gets their own spot, right? We were going to solve ethnic divisions here, underlining, but the treaty led to more conflicts, unfortunately. And so in the Middle East here, I'm going to put a star by this, it says it's still a source of tension in the Middle East where countries were literally created by drawing lines in the sand. Obviously, the Middle East has a lot of desert. So they literally just went and drew lines and decided, okay, this land belongs to this person. I mean, not this person, but this group of people, and this to this group, and blah, blah. And then it ended up being seen as terribly inequitable, but we'll get there. Okay. The treaty did overlap with some of the 14 points, but not all, okay, because he had to kind of pitch those 14 points to the other Allied powers, and everybody had to agree and then present it to Germany. Um, and so he had presented these 14 points. He presented it to them at the treaty when they were drawing up the Treaty of Versailles. Congress rejected the treaty because they were worried about the League of Nations. I'm going to underline that here. They were worried that it would rob Congress of power by kind of taking over direction of the American military. And so, because of that, Wilson had actually put together this whole League of Nations idea, but the U.S. didn't actually join. Okay? U.S. never joined the League of Nations because there was a concern there that even though Wilson had thrown this idea together, that there would be a loss of our freedom, of our independence as Americans if we agreed to such a thing. So Americans wanted to return to isolationism. Remember, we talked about this also. Isolationism, big star. Okay? Where we worry about our own stuff and we let other countries fight their own battles. You know, we're going back all the way, we're kind of rolling it back to the George Washington days, okay? We're not making alliances. We're not making international agreements. We're not messing in their politics so that they don't mess with ours, okay? So all of the steps forward that we had taken, all the steps forward that we had taken with like progressively with the Monroe Doctrine and things like that, all of those were sort of walked back at this point. The conflict with Germany was finally it was finally enough to show the American people that, hey, you know, maybe we don't actually want to be super involved in the world as a whole. All right, this has been another pretty long video, so I will let you go. Please, 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 if you'll notice on this page, kind of on the edge of this image, there are 7 questions. They cover the entirety of the World War I notes that we did from this book, not the worksheet specifically, but the notes that we did from my little notebook. So if you'll go back, watch those videos, answer those 7 questions, then you will be good to go. All right? And I will talk to you later. I hope you have a great and wonderful day.